Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Kanturk Arts Festival's Christmas Miscellany, a night of magical entertainment from North Cork. We have musicians, poets, storytellers, and songsters lined up to lift your spirits as we move into the Christmas season. We know you're going to enjoy what they are going to delight us with, so sit back with your glass of tipple or your cup of tea and enjoy. Our first performance this evening is from the highly acclaimed musician John O Sullivan, who last year was the Slieve Lucre musician in residence and plays with many bands, one of being the Cayley All-Stars. Welcome, Owen.
Starting a bit of a high note or something a bit more lively. So I just had my guitar handy, like we were saying there. I suppose we haven't had a chance to do much playing or stuff, but over lockdown I've been playing my guitar a lot. I'd normally play the fiddle, but they don't like me playing the fiddle at home, so I started playing. I could sneak around playing the guitar, no one could hear me. So this is a little tune. I'm not sure. It's called. I think it's called the Castle Island Races or something. It's normally played as a jig or whatever, but I'm going to play a kind of a little kind of Muzak version that I came up with while I was over lockdown, I suppose. Okay, enjoy. One second, give me 1 second now. Where's my sound? Oh yeah, 1 second, I'll pull down my own mic here. Ah yeah, that's better.
much. Is everybody unmute? Thank you very much, Eoin. That was wonderful. Okay, so if everybody makes sure their microphones are muted again. And next to perform for us this evening is author and playwright Mary Angland from Kanturk. She's the author of Cry of the Curlew and Other Stories, which are currently available in Kanturk Bookstore, SuperValu, Kanturk and Newmarket and Presence of Mind. Tonight, Mary is reading her short story, On a Cattle Boat to England. This story remembers the 500,000 people who emigrated from Ireland in the 50s to find work. One of these emigrants was Mary's aunt, who left in 1950, aged 20. Mary Angland.
Thanks, Viv. There are 3 voices actually in this short story. There's mine as an adult, and there's mine as a 10-year-old child, and my aunt. Wednesday, May 22nd, 2013. I stand in the shade of the porch and watch the rays of the early afternoon sun slant through the railings outside the Sacred Heart Church in Carlton, Nottinghamshire. Elderly women stand talking around in groups. We're waiting for Auntie. We're always waiting for Auntie, because she is, as always, running late. And while I wait, I close my eyes and remember. Tell me a story, my 10-year-old self begged, slipping my hand into hers. I loved when Auntie came home on holidays from Nottingham and told her wonderful tales. That day, she laughed as she squeezed my hand and began to speak. Well, the train frightened me, she said. The piercing whistle and the belching black smoke. There were people on the platform, some holding suitcases as battered looking as my own. They were young mostly, around my age, 17. Some looked even younger, no more than 14. I gripped my old brown suitcase as I looked at the train, waiting there for me to board. Do you know, I'd never seen one before. Will I tell you a secret, Mary, she said. I've never been further than 10 miles beyond this village before that day that I left. Can you imagine that? The train rumbled on towards Dublin, taking me further and further away from home. The night before, my father handed me a 10-shilling note, a fortune, and I wondered how he'd got it. But I learned months later that he'd sold our donkey to a traveller family passing through the village. Never a man to show his emotions, he had shaken my hand that night, telling me to mind myself over there. That morning, as I said goodbye to the rest of the family, he was nowhere at all to be seen. Here Auntie paused for a moment. Mama died of TB when I was only 9. You know, her leaving broke my heart, and it's never mended in all the years since. If Mama was alive, Mary, oh, I would never ever have left. Here Auntie began to cry. Even though it was years and years since her mother had died, she always cried when she spoke about her. So I waited as she blew her nose before continuing her story. Heavens, the boat was huge. The cattle boat, it was called, because so many cattle were being carried across to England. An oldish man in a long coat turned to me and said, "Them poor animals there are going along with us. They're being taken over to Birkenhead." He looked at my face. "It's across the river from the city of Liverpool. You know, where the boat docks." I nodded, but was too cold to say anything. At 9 o'clock that night, 13th of January 1950, the cattle boat departed the North Wall for Liverpool, taking me with it. The sea was rough and I was terrified, thinking that the boat would surely sink. What with the weight of the cattle and the people and everything. Oh dear, wasn't I the innocent one then? 7 hours after we left the North Wall, we docked in Liverpool. The cattle were treated better than the passengers. They got to be driven off first. And it was only then that we were allowed off ourselves. And as we disembarked, we had an awful job avoiding all the fresh cow dung. Here she stopped, and the 10-year-old child that was me imagined the dark, cold night, the swelling of the sea, the bellows of the cattle squashed together in the darkness, and I blinked my eyes and come back to the present. Wednesday, May 22nd, 2013, outside the Sacred Heart Church in Carlton. Outside, in a pool of sunlight, I see that Auntie has finally arrived. The hearse gliding to a smooth halt at the gate. Then I notice there's a small group of men, elderly men, gathering at the back of the vehicle. As Auntie prepares for her final entry into her parish church, they all shuffle into line behind her coffin. These men, frail and ailing, some with walking sticks, who have all come out to say a last goodbye to one of their own. Transfixed, I watch them. This is the last of the generation of Irishmen who had arrived, like Auntie, in England in the cattle boats of the 50s. I look at their faces as they shake my hand and whisper their condolences. And I see that England has not been kind to them. From the shadows of the porch, I watch as they slowly follow Auntie up the aisle of the church. And I see in my mind's eye the young, hopeful faces of those same men as they swayed on the decks of the cattle boats heading out for Liverpool from the North Wall all those years ago. And there among them, a young dark-haired girl, clutching her cardboard suitcase and trying not to slip on the fresh cow dung in her one good pair of shoes.
Thank you, Mary. That was wonderful. So a round of applause for Mary, please. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, now we're going to move on. And as you know, like using Zoom for an event like this can be very problematic. So just bear with us if there's any slight technical hitches and we'll try and get over them. But I'm sure we'll sail through the night very well. So next up is a singer-songwriter, Séan Bowman, who is originally from America, but now lives near Bobwee. And Séan's first song is called The Sound of Angels, dedicated to those who are suffering from a loss. So let me introduce to you Séan Bowman.
Thank you, Viv. Of all the songs I've written, this is probably one that I hold the dearest to me, so I enjoy it. I hope you will too. White sheets and metal rails, the beating of a hard machine that's bound to fail. I got an IV and a memory. It takes me back to my younger years, and the voice of the Lord comes down from up above, soothing to my soul. I've heard the voice of love, to the sound of angels. He's calling me, saying, come home, my son, it's time for you to see what I've made for you. You've waited so true, I can feel the rays of glory on my face, as I prepare to enter into heaven's gates, to the sound of angels. My family surround my bed. I don't know why they're crying as they kiss my head, 'cause I can see the bluest skies coming through the ceiling as I close my eyes. And the voice of the Lord comes down from up above, soothing to my soul. I've heard the voice of love, to the sound of angels. He's calling me, saying, come home, my son. It's time for you to see what I've made for you. You've waited so true. I can feel the rays of glory on my face as I prepare to enter into heaven's gates, to the sound of angels. He's calling me, saying, come home, my son. It's time for you to see what I made for you. You've waited so true. I can feel the rays of glory on my face as I prepare to enter into heaven's gates, to the sound of angels, to the sound of angels.
Wonderful, wonderful. The audience is getting rowdy here. Okay. Our next comes from John O Sullivan. He's a native of Kilcorny, and he's been entertaining audiences for many years with his hilarious monologues. John's first piece is titled The Gloves. Welcome, John O Sullivan.
Thanks, Viv. I was always a bit backwards about going forwards, and why I don't know. Some people said I was shy, others said I was a wee bit slow. My father blamed my mother for rearing me a lazy sod, but she maintained it was all his fault, for all his crowd were a bit odd. Well, I had my eye on Mary Ann these last 18 years or so, but the only thing that held me back was in case she might say no. You see, the problem was I had turned her down way back in our younger days. Now, it wasn't that she had got any better looking. It was just that I was a little less hard to please. Well, I was put in contact with a man, an expert in these things, who swore to me he had a plan and I should go and buy the rings. Says he, follow my advice and you'll be on the right track. Her face will beam with delight and you never will look back. Next time you meet her, pay her a lot of heed. Take a good look at what she's wearing. See if there's anything she might need. Perhaps a scarf around her neck or something for her hair. And if you like the plan, come back to me and we'll take it on from there. Well, by God, that very evening I was going down for a pint when who should I meet but Mary Ann, and she coming pedalling on her bike. Just as we were meeting, along came this great big truck, blew the clothes nearly clean off her. And by God, didn't I get a real good look. There wasn't much that she needed now as far as I could see. All her odds and ends were covered from just below her knee. Ah, but there and then I spied it. What a man could buy for the woman he loves. 'Twas sitting there in front of me. She wasn't wearing gloves. I went to town the next Thursday on the bus from Bowman to try and buy a pair of gloves, the first part of the plan. I told me ma what I was doing, and could she recommend the kind. She said you'd be better off buying a pair for yourself and not always be borrowing mine. But she said, look, she said, I'll go with you. You might need me to try them on. Well, that wasn't part of the plan, but sure, I said I'd play along. She said we'll go to the little drapery shop that's owned by Fred McVickers. I'm in an awful way for a pair of pants. That's what women now call knickers. Well, When we arrived at the shop, sure, I was completely mesmerised. And when the shopkeeper asked me, I didn't even know her size. I felt an awful idiot. I didn't know what to do. I said, by God, you have me there, but she's about a 7 in a shoe. Well, I bought a pair about her size, as far as I could tell. A lovely leather pair, with a lovely leather smell. And then I spied a man's pair up upon a shelf, and I remembered what me ma had said. So I bought them for myself. When I got home, I took me ma's advice, and I splashed on the remains of a bottle of allspice. And then I said, Ma, where's the shopping? She said, 'tis up upon the bed. But sure, when I went to pick up the gloves, didn't I pick the knickers up instead? I left the house as proud as punch, not realising what I'd done. And I leapt up on the tractor and I got it started on the run. And when I got to Mary Ann's, I could see she was all alone. So I parked the tractor on the slope and I faced her for home. Then I sidled up to the door and on it I did knock. Mary Ann came out. Now it's time we had a talk. And here's a little something that I got in the vicar's shop. And I handed her the present with a little love heart on the top. Well, she opened up the present. And she didn't look one bit pleased. And the bit of a grin that had been there before had quickly been erased. I thought, oh God, she doesn't like the gloves. And I felt an awful dread as her face began to tighten and the hair stood on her head. I said, I liked them when I saw them on the shelf. In fact, I liked them that much, I bought a pair for myself. You see, when it'd be cold, I'd wear my mother's. And I knew it wasn't fair to be always wearing hers and they her only pair. Well, by now the face was flaming by Mary Ann. I thought she'd blow a fuse, and the language that come out of her, I never heard a woman use. And just at that, she knocked me back and she knocked me off my feet. And in the melee that followed, I lost my cap and my bottom set of teeth. Well, I freewheeled down that boreen, hopping off each ditch, and my 2 ears still ringing from the roars of yon old bitch. If I ever meet that expert, I'll tell him to take his plan and to stick it where the sun don't shine, and to hell with Mary Ann. Thank you.
Oh, hilarious. Thank you so much, John.
Yes, brilliant.
Oh, God. You're still laughing. We're still laughing, John. Okay, the next performance comes from singer Jayne Harrington, another of our local singer-songwriters. Jayne is also a very, very talented instrumentalist. Her first piece is the Kerry Christmas Carol by Sigerson Clifford. So welcome, Jayne.
Thanks. Hope you enjoy. Brush the floor and clean the heart and set the fire to keep, for they might visit us tonight when all the world's asleep. Don't blow the tall white candle out, but leave it burning bright, so that they'll know they're welcome here this holy Christmas night. Leave out the bread and meat for them, and the sweet milk for the child, and they will bless the fire that baked, and to the hands that toil. For Joseph will be travel tired, and Mary pale and wan, and they can sleep a little while before they journey on. They will be weary of the roads, and rest will comfort them, for it must from here to Bethlehem. Along the roads they have to go, the bad mile with the poor, till the journey ends on Calvary, beneath that cross of wood. So leave the door upon the latch and set the fire to keep, and pray they'll rest with us tonight when all the world's asleep. Don't blow the tall white candle out, but leave it burning bright, so that they'll know they're welcome here this holy Christmas night.
Thank you, Jayne. That was lovely. Well done, Jayne. Now, our next performer. The next performance is by author Mary Bradford from Charleville. Mary has 2 novels and 3 novellas published, available in Canterbury Bookstore and Amazon. The third part of her trilogy in the Lacey Taylor series will be published next spring. Mary is going to read her story, The Grandfather I Can't Recall. This piece was published in last month's Ireland's Own magazine. So welcome, Mary Bradford.
Thank you, Viv. And like Viv just said, it's a memory piece. Grandad died 7 months after my 2nd birthday. Speaking to my sister and brother, older than I, they both remember him. He was not a tall man and wore a hat and had broad shoulders. His walking stick is something they both spoke about, how he would bang tables and chairs with it, obviously to drive home a point he felt very enthusiastic. This passion was scary for young children, and they often left the room to avoid the brandishing stick. What had made him so zealous? His love for show horses. My sister remembers those beautiful animals, a love she herself harbours to this day. The horse most remembered is titled Windy Day, a beautiful animal by all accounts. Our home is almost centre of a half ring of houses, a mile outside the town, and my siblings would be out playing in the garden when they would spy him arriving. As he rounded by the low wall, taking the corner with his ever-present walking stick, they rushed to tell Mammy that Grandad was here. Unfortunately, being only 2, I don't recollect anything. Even when I look upon his photo displayed in my parents' home, framed amongst the other family photographs on the sitting room wall, nothing comes to mind. Grandad was a farmer, and the place passed to the eldest son, as was the tradition with land. My dad was the youngest of 4, his 2 sisters being the eldest, and his brother following them. And when one of my aunts left for Liverpool, Grandad travelled the Irish Sea by ferry to visit. When speaking with my aunt for years, she would speak of Dada with love, happiness at his memory shining on her face. My most clear reflection in relation to Grandad is the day I was playing with my dolls. I must have been 5 or 6. I had found a scarf, goodness knows where, a tartan pattern, a soft tan colour with a red, a cream and a black stripe weaved in it. I showed it to my parents who were talking in the sitting room and asked could I play with it and use it for clothes for my dolls. Dad told me to go ahead and play with it. I am into crafts. I'm making dolls' clothes since I was 4 years of age. My mother taught me to sew, knit and crochet as she herself is a talented craftswoman. We were, my sister and brother being there too, all playing games in our bedroom. And I told them, Dad said we could use the scarf for dolls' clothes. I took that as okay to cut it up and did so. I made skirts, dresses and little sleeveless jackets. And when finished, I ran up the hallway to show my parents the great garments my dolls now wore. I saw my dad go pale. He placed his head in his hands and he cried. It had belonged to the man himself, my Grandad Mackesy, and his father's scarf, now in pieces, one of the very few things he had left to remember him by. I can see his sadness to this day when I think of that moment. The silence at first following the fashion display of my dolls, and then Dad's tears. I asked my brother about this incident recently, and he too remembers it, because he said he and our sister got the blame for letting me cut it. Mam had given out to them, but not to me, and I don't remember that bit. After some time that afternoon, I went and said I was sorry to Dad for destroying his father's scarf. And as it plays in my mind, I see it like it was yesterday. Dad sitting by the fireside, Mam on the other side near the window. And whenever I think of that time, I'm surer than ever I broke his heart that day. Yet his words showed forgiveness and filled with fatherly love. Heading to the hallway going back to my dolls, I heard Dad tell Mam, "She wasn't to know," he said. "You can't blame the child." From the stories told about Grandad, I gleaned snippets of information as I grew up, and that is all I have of a man I don't recall. A man who worked hard, loved horses, and died in 1964. Memories are wonderful, but sharing them is better still. Thank you.
Very well done. If you all mute up again, and we have our next reader, and Janet Heeran is a local writer from the Kanturk Library Writers Group, and Janet is going to entertain us with her Christmas story titled "Even the Dog Wouldn't Eat the Turkey." So welcome, Janet.
Thank you. I've had to turn off the video so that you can hear me better. So you can imagine how beautiful I look. Okay, even the dog wouldn't eat the turkey. In order to understand why even the dog wouldn't eat the turkey that Christmas, you must meet my mother. She views Christmas time as a military campaign. Her ammunition is homemade Christmas cakes, puddings, mince pies, and the good old Madeira bun for those weak disposition. My mother does not believe that any of her family members would survive the onslaught of December 25th without her special forces expertise in confections. My mother's campaign preparations begin in October. When I phone her, she tells me that she did a bit of baking today, 13 light Christmas cakes in the oven, and a few puddings boiling. Nieces and nephews have inherited the right to a cake. With newfangled dietary notions, a gluten-free version can be produced on request. She makes enough baked goods to fuel a parish through a nuclear winter. Then comes her distribution system, which is worthy of the French resistance. My mother delivers bags of pastries to sympathisers changing trains in Mallow. Arriving in Dublin, they hand over the loot to my aunt. Plum puddings have been known to travel with a dependable nun on the expressway bus to Galway. When I was a child, my aunt, uncle and cousin would arrive from Dublin on Christmas Eve and stay for a few days. This was because my aunt could not be trusted to produce an appropriate feast for her family. Indeed, she has a track record of hosting dinner parties and forgetting to boil the potatoes. On one such event, it ended in the guests resorting to sliced pan to fill the gap. I'm sure my aunt was forgiven though, because she brings the gift of music with her. On Christmas Day, she'd take her place at the piano and we would belt our way through the carolling repertoire. The adults would have demolished the mulled wine, a few bottles of red and the sherry trifle. Buoyed up with the Christmas spirit and general excitement, my father would give his rendition of the West Clare Railway. Now that he's no longer with us, I'll miss his terribly off-key rendition of "Are You Right There, Michael, Are You Right?" My mother would relax as we turned her feast of turkey, ham, Brussels sprouts, gravy and stuffing into sandwiches. Christmas was very predictable and ran like clockwork until the year my father spent the festive season in hospital in Dublin. If he could not come to Christmas dinner, then Christmas dinner would come to him. My mother loaded the car with the uncooked turkey, ham, Brussels sprouts, carrots and parsnips. Us children and the dog were jammed into the small space remaining. And off we went to our aunt, uncle and cousin's house in Dublin. This was the time before plug-in cooler boxes. The best that could be done to keep the meat cool was to wrap it in a newspaper. Now that might work for bringing home a block of ice cream from the corner shop, but it does not work with a 10-pound plucked bird travelling from Mallow to Dublin. My father was being released from hospital on Stephen's Day, so the Generalissimo decided to postpone the cook-off until then. So we ate a less salubrious meal that Christmas Day. My mother kept her powder dry until 24 hours later. When we walked into the kitchen on Stephen's Day morning, the stink from the fridge was horrendous. Only a pathologist would have been able to handle the smell of the turkey corpse. The poor bird had decided that its time had come and unfortunately gone. Undaunted, my mother announced war on the turkey. She stuffed the creature and cooked it. I can assure you the stench did not improve. In fact, with very little effort, I can feel the smell throwing its way up my nose and into my stomach, where it churns my breakfast into bile. We children complained, but the adults assured us it would all taste grand. Somewhere in the melee of peeling a mountain of potatoes and scoring the stems of the sprouts, my father arrived back from hospital. He sat in his throne at the top of the table. He took the carving knife in hand and prepared to reproduce his surgeon's skills on the beast. My uncle was invited to try the first slice of the breast. However, he had sense enough to declare an end to the charade and the turkey as inedible. My mother drew a discreet veil over the failed mission and quickly whisked the offending bird to the outdoors, where the dog was expected to enjoy a feast. We turned our attention to the ham, which was delicious, pulled the crackers, and later on my father announced his return to health with a blast of, "Are you right there, Michael, are you right?" The world returned to its axis. The dog never even touched the turkey, and in the end my uncle buried the body in the back garden. So, as we face into an unusual Christmas Day this year, let us remember that even when we have to change our traditions, we will survive. And as Michael of the West Clare Railway might have said, we'll be home before the night. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Now we have our second piece of music from Owen O'Sullivan. So Owen, if you're ready now, will you take over?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just gonna play a piece, a nice slow piece that I normally play, or that I play a lot. It's called. I never had a title on it, and but I call it 1921 now. Oh yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks.
Thank you, Eoin.
Before I go, thing that I wanted to tell you about, actually, if that's okay. I'm back. You were saying there in my introduction earlier on that I was doing the musician in residence job for Slieve Luca. I'm back doing that job or whatever, and I'm starting a kind of a series of online concerts starting next Saturday night, the 12th of December at 8 o'clock. If you have a look at sleeveluca.ie, or there'll be links on Facebook and stuff during the week anyway. But we'd love to see you there, and well done as well for doing this event. This is brilliant. It's great to a bit of community, and it's well done.
Thank you, Eoin. Thank you, and well done yourself. I'm sure there's plenty of us will tune into Slieve Luca next Sunday and listen to some of the concerts that are going on. So well done to yourselves as well. Okay, so our next performer is Mike Guerin from Newmarket. Mike is a writer and a drama teacher, and tonight he's going to entertain us with the song "The Village We All Know Well." Welcome, Mike Guerin.
Thank you. Sorry, Stan, for kicking you out of the band. Anyway, I'm from a lovely village, a place you all know well. A knob of boggy land, there's nothing at all like hell. A place of restful silence, punctuated by tortured screams. But that's enough about that, because we don't say what we feel. Our lovely local river, where we did once swim, is filling up with slurry and silage effluent to the brim. Our beautiful local wood, where we did once court, is now intensive forestry, native species it doesn't support. But these losses of all habitats are a simple sign. The economy, it is booming, industries at an all-time high. You in a prison cell or stuck down in a well, you'll never quite escape from the village we all know well. We're famed throughout the land for our famous sons, who played some sort of GAA when they weren't shooting guns. They were fantastic sportsmen, of that we may be sure, and rumours of their violent crimes is something we don't explore. Heroes of a distant war we romanticise and praise. We've applied for several grants to immortalise their names. Now we have a plaque a mile beyond the bend. Tom Toomey often swears he once saw a tourist pulling in. He saw them take a photo, pray and briefly weep, but his wife will still maintain that they stopped to take a leak. Be you in a prison cell or stuck down in a well, you'll never quite escape from the village we all know well. The local hurling team have moved up from Junior B. The mighty celebrations have been ongoing for a year. They showed some mighty heart when they did it for the jersey. Their aggression on the field was wonderful to survey. And anyone who believes their rumours is completely insane. Their newfound skills are not the results of steroids and cocaine. Be you in a prison cell or stuck down in a well, you'll never quite escape from the village we all know well. The main street of the village has shops and bars galore. Unfortunately, we have to say that was 1964. Now there is a single pub with characters in great store. You could meet Jaxie Doocy, who isn't lonely anymore. His vibrant hallucinations caused by rural isolation have become so clear and vivid that he chats to his Alsatian. Donny Dinjo Nostril is another local card. He just got out of prison for assaulting a guard. These classic Irish characters, they are a dying breed, but we can see them every day getting sick in the village green. Be you in a prison cell or stuck down in a well, you'll never quite escape from the village we all know well. And when you see our village green, the facts will come as a shock. It actually was a ghost estate they finally agreed to knock. The unfinished houses were ploughed into the ground, and now we have an amenity of which we can be proud. Our beautiful concrete grotto is very well maintained, even since herself stopped moving and swaying. The secession coincided with the passing of Father Kinney, but no one's seen any evidence that he helped make her shimmy. Be you in a prison cell or stuck down in a well, you'll never quite escape from the village we all know well. Now our song has reached its end, but our village it will survive. For like the Roman Empire, it is eternal and divine. One more time. Be you in a prison cell or stuck down in a well, you'll never quite escape from the village we all know well. Thank you very much.
Well done, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. That was very entertaining. Well, we all know where you live. Right. Okay, so our next performer is another member of the Kanturk Library Writers Group. This is Joan Murphy with a story entitled Blue Blouses and Bloody Olives. This was shortlisted for the Kanturk Arts Short Story Competition in 2020. So please welcome Joan Murphy.
Thanks, Vivian. Blue blouses and bloody olives. When the sea meets the sky, you can't tell where the sky ends and the sea begins. But this is my blue. My blue is the colour of the blouse I've on today, a present from Silvio for our wedding anniversary. We are the same person, he and I. We do everything together. We are conjoined. The blouse clings to me today, and little beads of perspiration trickle down my back. I want to tear it off, scrunch it into a ball, and tip it into the bin. Instead, I throw open the heavy shutters in the kitchen to catch a breath. But there is no air. I rest my body against the stone wall we had never got around to plastering and listen to the familiar clatter from the street below our apartment. We are ordinary people, Silvio and I, in a very ordinary village, but sometimes very ordinary people do extraordinary things. Soon they will come. They will come first to other villages like ours, and I will join them. Their low chanting will be replaced by screams and shouts as they draw closer. Thoughts racing, I turn on the box radio, anything to distract me. General Franco booms out. His voice fills the room, overcrowding my space. I turn the dial quickly and put an earpiece into my ear. The broadcaster speaks of running battles with the army and international appeals for assistance. Glancing at the stone walls around me, I imagine in each crevice thousands of ears listening and tiny mouths speaking. Brother against brother, father against son, neighbour against neighbour. I turn off the radio. Outside her apartment, fronds of bougainvillea tumble almost out onto the street, majestic in pink, I think, glorifying in their just being as they should. But they wear their colours as I do, and everything is not as it seems. It must be nearly 3 o'clock when Marcus, our neighbour, cycles by. I call out to him. He looks up, but does not want to answer me today. I light the small gas stove, slice manchego cheese onto plates, and open a jar of olives. A little drop of blood from my clumsy cutting lands on the olives. Then I put on my shoes and smooth my eyebrows into place with a damp finger. A blue bottle dive bombs onto the cheese and I let it idle there. Later, a spider toys within its web, foreplay to extinction. Now Silvio stands in front of me. A stray ray of evening sun bounces off the new gold crucifix around his neck. Marcus is with him. Their army caps hang low on their heads, on their faces, but that new incendiary purpose in their eyes can never be hidden. I kiss Silvio like he is Jesus, the Messiah. His supper is ready, but I am ready too, foraging for the knife in my pocket. Viva l'Internationale.
Thank you, Joan. Well done. Next up we have John Bowman again, and he's now going to sing his own song, Rail Through Ripley. This song is about the history of the Underground Railroad in Ripley, Ohio, which helped slaves find freedom from the Kentucky plantations. So welcome again, Sean Bowman.
This is a new song I've never played before, so I have a cheat sheet, so I won't forget the lyrics. So. Sunset across the field, carry me far away. Take me to a new home, Lord, do you hear me pray? Mountaintop and a blood moon rising, I'm a run, I can make a way. Take me to a new home, Lord, do you hear me pray? Ohio River dripping off my skin, Mr. Parker, make no delay. Take me to a new home, Lord, do you hear me pray? See the light on Liberty Hill, Rankin preacher gonna lead the way. Take me to a new home, Lord, do you hear me pray? 5 days and nights on the run, plantation boss wanna chain me like a hound. No looking back, them days are done. This train I'm on is rolling underground, underground. In the morning when the sun be shining, Kentucky life gonna fade away. Take me to a new home, Lord, do you hear me pray? On the rail that'll run through Ripley, left the men that heard me say, take me to a new home, Lord, do you hear me pray? 5 days and nights on the run, plantation boss wanna chain me like a hound. No looking back, them days are done. This train I'm on is rolling underground, underground.
Thank you, Séan. Okay, right. And now our next performer is John O Sullivan again, and he's going to perform his second story, and the title is A Trip to Tramore. So enjoy.
Thanks, Viv. My uncle John Bryan lived with his mother, a widow woman aged 94, but she died of a sudden after eating black pudding from a pig that died 3 weeks before. John was sad, sure 'twas the only pig that he had, and now he lay dead at his feet. Though his poor heart was breaking, he said he'd not waste the bacon, for himself and his mam loved red meat. So a bag of salt he procured, and the bacon he cured, and he hung it up on a hook over the fire. Such a fine lump of meat, with no best before date, and no word of when 'twill expire. In the weeks that passed by, every morning a fry, they had 2 pork chops each around midday. For dinner 'twas bacon, and if I'm not mistaken, 'twas crew beans and drisheen for the tea. But one Friday night, John awoke with a fright to hear his mam give a strange cough. He rushed to her side. In his arms, sure she died. Her last words, that pudding was off. John was distraught, but his very first thought was perhaps he'd not let her go. They'd been together for years, mid the joys and the tears. Without her, sure where would he go? At 15 he'd left school, but he was nobody's fool, though not brilliant with figures or words. And from a tutor named Bernie, he'd learned taxidermy, how to stuff small animals and birds. So armed with this knowledge from St. David's College, he set to work with great care. He worked through the night so his ma would look right. He even put a perm in her hair. When his work was complete, his ma, she looked neat, dressed up in her fine Sunday best. With her hat on her head, if you didn't know that she was dead, then by God, you'd never have guessed. Now, a week prior to her death, his ma had expressed a regret that to the seaside she'd never gone. She felt an old dip would cure her bad hip. We'll go for your birthday, says John. Now, to keep his ma alive till she reached 95, that was John's only intention. But first things came first, and he feared for the worst when he went down the town for her pension. The postmistress said, John, how's your mum getting on? I hope that she's feeling okay. Says John, she's all right. She had a very quiet night, and she's not been complaining today. On the July 1st Friday, John prays for a dry day. He took his ma out to the line. He set her up in a pose as though pegging out clothes, and he thought to himself, she looks fine. Father Burke called round. John made not a sound as he hid behind the plum tree. How are you, Mrs. Bryan? John croaked out, I'm fine, but I'll not have you in for the tea. When her birthday rolled by, it was the 5th of July, John backed the car up to the door. He loaded his mam with some brown bread and jam, and they both set off for Tramore. When they reached the seashore, it was 3:45, John found a quiet spot on the beach. He'd £20 in a jar. He paid £3 for the car. That left them with £8.50 each. He pulled out a deck chair, put his mam sitting there as though she was having a nap. He poured himself a small paddy, gave his mum some my waddy, and he put the Ireland's own in her lap. John was soon fast asleep. The waves rolled in from the deep. The tide crept closer to shore. It swirled round his mam's body, spilled her glass of my waddy, but John just continued to snore. He awoke with a shock. It was near 9 o'clock. So the tide had come in and moved on. The sun was now low. He said, Mammy, we'll go. But sure, Mammy was already gone. He looked out on the tide. Oh, Mammy, he cried as he watched her sail over the foam. With a tear in his eye, he bade her goodbye, and he packed up his stuff and went home. Though his ma was recovered, his deed was never discovered. They said a woman drowned aged 94. But John, he knew better, and he'd never forget her, nor the birthday they'd spent in Tramore. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Excellent. Now we're coming to the last performance of the evening, and we are going back to Jayne Harrington, who's going to sing us out with the well-loved Christmas carol, O Holy Night. So welcome, Jayne.
Holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Saviour's birth. Long lay the world in sin and ever pining, till He appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder joy in playful chorus waves we let all within us praise His holy name. Fall on your knees, oh hear the angel voices, oh night divine, oh night when Christ was born, oh night divine, all night divine.
Thank you, Jayne.
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you all for being with us. Thank you all for being with us on this magical night of entertainment, especially the people that have joined us from far afield. I see there's some people from Liverpool here and maybe more from the UK. So you were very welcome, and it's lovely to have brought you all into our small part of North Cork where we've shared with you the talent that we have in our own locality. So first of all, I'd like to thank all the performers for the enthusiasm, the talent that they've shared with us this evening, and also for rehearsing, because we had to rehearse last week to make sure that we just had enough broadband around the area to be able to pull this one off. So thank you all. I'm just going to read out their names, and then I'd like you to unmute your microphones and give them all a round of applause. So to Owen O'Sullivan, Mary Angland, Séan Bowman, Mary Bradford, Jayne Harrington, John O Sullivan, Mike Guerin, Heeran and Joan Murphy. Thank you.
Well done.
Well done, everyone. I'd also like to thank the committee of the Kanturk Arts Festival, chaired by Lisa Eoin, for organising the Christmas 2020 events. It was quite a hard job to organise all this, and especially because we're using things like Zoom and technology that we've never used before, but I think it's all worked out. And so thank you to everybody that has helped us. And we hope 2021 will bring a new start for all of us, and we wish you stay safe and well for the next months. Good night, and a very happy Christmas to you all, and a happy New Year. Good night.
Nice.
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 Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, well done.